Hi, my name is Magda Habas. I'm a professor at Canadian University, and I do research on electromagnetic pollution, and I work with people who have developed electrical hypersensitivity.
How did you become interested in the problem relation to electromagnetic pollution and the electrosensitivity?
At my university, I teach a course called Pollution Ecology, and so we deal with different environmental contaminants, mercury, PCBs, DDT, lots of chemical pollutants. And I was interested in doing some research on electromagnetic radiation as well. And so I began to introduce it into my course. So my interest is purely curiosity originally, and the more research I did, the more concerned I became about the harmful effects that I was learning in the literature.
What is in the current scientific evidence on electrosensitivity?
We have quite a bit of research on electrical hypersensitivity. People who live near power lines, people who live near cell phone antennas, people who use cell phones and put it up against their head, they have a number of different reactions to this radiation. Some of the symptoms include fatigue, difficulty sleeping, difficulty concentrating, problems with poor short-term memory, confusion. Sometimes they have problems with depression and with anxiety disorders. Some people have a ringing in their ear. Other people develop skin problems. So the symptoms that they have if they're exposed to this radiation are quite severe and debilitating for the individual. The science shows that there are problems with the nervous system, there are problems with the hormonal system, there are problems with the digestive system. So all of the systems in the body are affected in some way with different people.
Mm-hmm. Some point of view, scientific point of view about electrosensitivity are wrong, and why?
Okay. Some people don't believe that there is such a thing as electrohypersensitivity. Some people believe that it's a psychological problem, that they see an antenna and they become scared, and so it's not physiological, it's psychological. But we have a lot of research that shows it affects your heart, it affects your autonomic nervous system, so we can measure this. It affects your blood, for example. It affects the amount of sugar you have in your blood, and this is a real problem for people who have developed diabetes, for example. So we have a lot of very good science showing that it's affecting your body physiologically. It's not psychological. However, if someone is suffering from electrohypersensitivity, there is a psychological component as well, because they're feeling so ill, that they can't think straight. If other people don't believe that this is a problem, that affects them as well. So there is a psychological component, but it's secondary, it's not primary.
Okay. What kind of research should be done and why in this moment?
I don't think we need more research. I think we have enough research that we can act. And I think what we should do is begin to reduce our exposure. We need to educate the public. We need to educate medical doctors so they can help people who have become sick. We need to educate the government who is making this technology available. We need to educate the media so they understand that there are some people who do good research and some people who are paid by the industry to do bad research, so that there's confusion as to what the harmful effects are. So when it comes to research, I honestly believe we know there's enough evidence for us to act.
Okay, and for the electrohypersensitivity people too?
We have enough evidence for electrical hypersensitivity as well. We know that probably maybe 5% of the population have very severe problems where they cannot live in cities anymore. They have to go out into the countryside where there's no exposure at all. We know that maybe a third of the population has moderate or mild problems where they develop a headache, they can't think clearly, but they can still work. So they're functioning at a suboptimal level. But we know enough that these people are very sick. We know what they need to do in order to improve, and we just have to make sure that that's what happens in society.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Do you want me to go to the next one?
Yes.
One of the most sensitive people in our population are children. We know that children are much more sensitive to microwave radiation. So when a child holds a cell phone to their head, the radiation penetrates right through the head. When an adult holds a cell phone to their head, it only penetrates a short amount. And so we know that children should be protected against this radiation. So when we have schools where they have Wi-Fi in the classroom, this is the worst thing that we could expose our children to, particularly young children up to the age of, grade 5, grade 6, grade 7. They shouldn't be exposed to this radiation at all. When it comes to using access to the internet, which is what Wi-Fi is, it's one way of getting access to the internet. We know there are better ways of doing this, and that's through wires, through an Ethernet connection or fiber optic connection. Once you put the radiation on the wire, it's no longer in the classroom, and it's having no adverse effects on the people, like the teachers and the students.
Mm-hmm. And about attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, what do you think?
We have some evidence that students who are exposed to microwave radiation, who are exposed to dirty electricity, which comes from computers, for example, they develop symptoms of attention hyperdeficit disorder. So they become very agitated. They can't calm down. They can't think clearly. And so by putting this technology in the classroom, we're actually making it harder for students to learn. So there is a connection between attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and exposure to electromagnetic pollution.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's some evidence that mothers who use cell phones, who use wireless computers while they're pregnant, that their children are likely to become electrically hypersensitive, but they're also likely to develop ADHD at the same time.
It's possible that the damage generated today could affect the future generations?
Yes, we have some evidence that if we begin to affect the ovaries of young girls and the eggs that they produce, that it's going to have a long-lasting effect. We already know that this radiation affects sperm quality. So the sperm doesn't move as quickly, it dies much more quickly. Some of the sperm is deformed. So we know that women are having a harder time becoming pregnant, partly because of their exposure to electrosmog and because of the poor quality sperm. But once it affects the eggs, because eggs are present from birth, so you don't produce any new eggs in your lifetime, you have them all present at birth. If you damage the egg, then you damage successive generations. So very, very important to protect young girls from this radiation.
Mm-hmm. And in light of current scientific knowledge, what should authorities be doing about the general population and people with AHS? General population and people with AHS.
I think everyone is sensitive to this energy. So it's not just people who have symptoms of electrohypersensitivity. We are electromagnetic beings. Our heart rate, our brainwave activity, all of our cells are electromagnetic. And when we're exposed to this radiation, it interrupts the functioning of our cells. And so whether you have symptoms or not, you're going to be affected by this radiation. The people who are electrically hypersensitive have been exposed to too much of the radiation already. Many of them actually worked with computers and had cell phones very early on, so their exposure has been for a longer period at a higher intensity than the rest of the population. But whether or not you have symptoms or not, you are sensitive. So the more you're exposed, the worse your symptoms are likely to become. And that's why it's so important, not only to protect people who are electrically hypersensitive, but to protect the rest of the population so they don't develop these symptoms of electrical hypersensitivity.
Okay. What are the main difficulties you have encountered in the development of your research work?
It's very difficult to do research because there's very little funding available to do this type of research. Certainly, I'm from Canada, and in North America, both in the United States and Canada, there is no research funding for scientists. A lot of the research now is coming from Asia, and some of it's coming from Europe, some of it's coming from the Middle East, because there they recognize there's a problem, and the governments are actually funding the research that their scientists are doing.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think there's so much attack on electrosensitivity people on the media? Do you know that?
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, people who are electrically hypersensitive, they tend to be mocked by the media. It's not like someone in a wheelchair. You wouldn't ever laugh at someone in a wheelchair. You wouldn't criticize them because they're in a wheelchair. But that's a noticeable disability. When it comes to electrohypersensitivity, there are a lot of people out there who don't believe this is possible. Their government tells them that there's no problem. Some scientists will say this can't hurt you. And so when you see someone who is complaining because they don't want you to use your cell phone because it makes them sick, it interferes with your ability to use the technology. And there's so many of us that rely on the technology. Indeed, some of the younger people are now addicted to this technology. So they don't want to be told, stop using it or change the way you use it. So no one wants to hear this. And when we had cigarette smoking, the people who were smoking didn't want to be told that this is going to cause lung cancer or heart disease because they wanted to continue smoking. So we're in the same situation right now. They'd like to pretend people who have electrosensitivity just don't exist because it would make it easier for them to use the technology without anyone trying to stop them.
Mm-hmm. But do you think that is the unique explication that some periodists attack too much?
Do I think that, sorry?
In the mass media, the periodists attack some...
Who's the period?
The professional in the mass media.
The professionals in the mass...
Some of they attack too much to the electro-hypersensitivity people.
Oh, I do think that there's more negative comments in the mass media about electrical hypersensitivity. Some of the mass media is owned by the telecom companies. And so it makes it easier for the reporters to criticize anyone who claims that they're electrically hypersensitive. So we really have to find out where's the money coming from and who's funding the different organizations that are sharing information. And that goes for scientific research, and it goes for the media as well.
Okay. And what is the situation in Canada regarding electromagnetic pollution, activist groups, and the EHS people?
In Canada, we have a lot of different groups that are trying to fight different aspects of electromagnetic pollution. So we have groups that are trying to fight antennas, so they don't want antennas to be brought close to schools, for example, or close to homes where people live. We have groups that are fighting smart meters, because smart meters are also producing a problem. In Canada, both microwave radiation and something called dirty electricity. And I know here in Spain you have the problem of dirty electricity with smart meters. once a smart meter goes into a home, people start becoming sick and they begin to develop the symptoms. So they can't avoid it because it's very close to where they live. We also have groups that are trying to protect people who are electrically hypersensitive. This is very, very important. And there are groups all over Canada and all over the United States, but they're not getting together. So they're individual groups fighting their own different problems. Another group of people we have are parents mostly and teachers trying to get Wi-Fi out of school. So this is another very large area because they're just trying to protect their children.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Could people with conflict of interest be tried for crimes against humanity in the future? Because in our organization have one person that killed out herself, and the family are very hungry.
That's right. We have people in Canada who have committed suicide because they can't live with this technology. It's hard to say. Some of the people who are promoting this technology are doing it because they're ignorant. They don't realize the harm that's involved with the technology, some people. Some people know there's harm, and they're simply not looking at it because they want to make money. And it's these people who are more interested in making a profit than in the protection of human life, who perhaps in the future will be brought up against criminal charges for causing harm. The problem is the government is not putting out appropriate guidelines.
Yeah.
So for example, in Canada, the government has a guideline that is here, but harmful effects occur at a much lower level. And so when the industry says, but we are under the guidelines, that is correct. So it's difficult to bring charges against them. I think what we need to do is bring charges against the government that is not having the appropriate protection for the people.
Mm-hmm. Will be very difficult.
That's very difficult, but I think it should be possible.
Mm-hmm.
So when the government fails to do their job, they should be held accountable. And sometimes the only way to hold them accountable is through a legal process, where you actually sue them for malpractice or for the type of work that they're doing.
Then, the electrosensitive people, if they forecast in the drastic increase in radiation, what can we do about making EHS people worse?
Well, what we really have to do is have areas that we call white zones. These are areas that don't have any electromagnetic or very, very low levels of electromagnetic pollution. People who have developed electrohypersensitivity cannot tolerate this. And so when we bring in new technology, more cell phones, more cell towers, 5G technology, the Internet of Things, this is going to make a very large percentage of the population sick, I think. And because of that, I think what we need to do is figure out where do we need to use this technology and where can we put the radiation on the wire. And I think the answer to that is when you have something that's mobile, so your phone cannot be connected with a cord, but your printer or your computer at home doesn't need to be wireless. It can be wired. So anything that has to move, you can use this technology for, but other things that don't have to move, you use wires. And if we did that, the level of radiation would come way down. And so people who are electrically sensitive would be protected, and the rest of the population wouldn't become electrically sensitive because their exposures would be so low.
In the short term,
Sorry,
in the short term,
short term, yes. Which
is
number?
an objective 60.
Or is it an objective health disaster foreseeable? Okay. In the very short term, the evidence is terrible. I think once they start bringing out the 5G technology, that the whole picture changes, because they are going to have so many different antennas at a very high frequency. In the United States, the frequencies that they're going to be using for 5G are frequencies that the military uses for crowd control. So they have an antenna that is at 95 gigahertz, and they aim it at a population, turn it on for a split second, and it causes so much pain in the body that everyone just disperses. So the military is using the same type of frequencies that we're going to be using in 5G. They're using it for crowd control, to control populations.
Besides the central nervous system, what other system might be affected?
The cardiovascular system is affected. The blood system is affected. People who have electrical sensitivity, their blood cells stick together so they don't flow freely. And it can cause problems like a stroke or a heart attack because their blood becomes so coagulated. We have evidence that it affects the skin. We have people breaking out in rashes. We have evidence that it affects the ears, where they have a ringing in the ear. We have evidence that it affects the eyes as well. Cataract formation is very common with microwave exposure. So virtually all parts of the body are affected, although the part that is affected the most is the nervous system.
Can we conclude that non-ionizing electromagnetic radiation is a cofactor or activator of other diseases too?
We know that people who have a very impaired immune system will develop electrohypersensitivity, so they are more prone to become sensitive. And these people are already very sensitive to other types of insults, chemical sensitivity, biological sensitivity, sensitivity to pathogens. So having a strong immune system is very, very important to try to get people to recover. So not only do you have to reduce your exposure, you have to build up your immune system so that you can tolerate the different stresses the environment presents.
Okay. Do you want to
say anything else?
Yes.
Okay. Perhaps what I'd like to say is that when it comes to electromagnetic pollution, there are 3 different areas that we have biological effects when it comes to the human population. One area is definitely cancer. Another area is reproduction, and a third area is electrical hypersensitivity. And I think when you put these 3 different things together, there's very little else that can go wrong with the body. If you develop cancer, you have obviously a reduced lifespan. If you develop electrohypersensitivity, you have an impaired quality of life. And if you develop problems with reproduction, then you're simply not going to have a healthy population in the future. So what we're doing now with the technology we currently have, it's already very dangerous. But once we have even more technology and newer technology, my prediction is that we're going to have a tsunami that we won't be able to deal with. And it'll be too late for the human population. Many people are going to become sick. Many people are going to die. And I think it bodes very poorly for the future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.